So I'm going to, after Shams, he's going to continue the workshop. Thank you.
We are going to travel to Turkey. It's much nicer, at least political way, but they have their own problem also. But at least all refugees, when they arrive in Turkey, they can breathe.
Farokh was released after the rape. Then he heard he'd been denounced for being gay. He fled to Turkey in fear of his life.
I crossed the borders with smugglers illegally, and it took us about 8 days from the northwestern city near the border in Iran to get into Ankara. Passing, rivers, in the snow, in ices, and the mountains, and the smugglers were so, violent.
من 42 سالمه. این 42 سال من توی ایران زندگی کردم. یعنی من از 7 سالگی که فهمیدم گی هستم تا زمانی که ازدواج کردم که 28 سالم بود که من ازدواج کردم، هیچ کس متوجه نشد که من گیم. هیچ کس متوجه نشد. تنها کسی که متوجه شده او مادرم بود. تو این 28 سال بعدش که 7 سال من ازدواج کردم، واقعا من میخوام بگم 42 سال من با یه نقاب زندگی کردم تو تهران.
من هنگامه هستم، 39 سالمه، لزبیانم و از بچگی مشکل داشتم با این قضیه. چون خانم مادری داشتم که خیلی تیز بود تو این مسائل، سریع متوجه میشد. از سن، یعنی این قضیه از تو مدرسه به مشکل من برخوردم تا زمانی که دانشگاه رفتم و اخراج شدم و همون لحظه که بیام بیرون از ایران.
ای پدر ما که در آسمان، ای پدر ما که در آسمان، خدا که ماست از همه ماها با هم که هستیم برادر و خواهر است.
Nereyi geziyorlar?
A long way from home. Today's Turkish language lesson is going to Australia. Finding a home somewhere in the West for now is the only dream for these Iranian and Afghan refugees in the southern Turkish city of Adana. Feryad Abdullahzadeh used to be a teacher and a political activist in Iran. He says he was fired, and 2.5 years ago he escaped to Turkey. He is now waiting to start a new life in a European country.
With the financial situation in Iran and sanction, the value of dollar, it makes life for these people very hard because most of them, they are being supported by their family in Iran.
In the past, we could get help from Iran, but now with the situation of the currency decrease and the value of the dollar, we get nothing. We don't have work permits here, and if we work, we have to do hard work. It's hard for us as women.
Refugees are frustrated with the UN's slow pace in processing their asylum applications. Unable to return home, many feel as if they have been trapped in Turkey for years.
My appointment with the UN is for March 2014. Before I came here, I thought we would be supported and our claims would be processed faster. But it wasn't the case at all.
I asked how many of them are waiting to be interviewed by the UN Refugee Agency.
Turkey only provides temporary refugee status to non-European asylum seekers, relying on the UNHCR to organize their transit to a third country.
Actually, I was in Turkey for 2 years as a refugee in the 90s. What you saw is a small, a little part of refugees' life in Turkey, but I saw when I was there, we thought as a refugee, with millions of Iranians run away in the last 36 years. They cross the border, we will be safe, but unfortunately we weren't. Iranian agents follow many of us, those political activists which I was. And while I was in Turkey, actually, they assassinated 2 of the refugees. And another case I remember, and I never forget, a father who himself ran to Turkey after he was accepted by the UNHCR. He went back through Turkey to Iraq to bring 2 of his sons, and in the border of Turkey and Iraq, the Turkish police shot his 2 sons, I think 17 and 19, and he came back, which was a long process, but the UNHCR, because of his situation, they sent him to Finland, I still remember. I don't know what's happened to him next, but just imagine what's happened. And also, as I mentioned in the question, what we saw in the coast of Italy, this is, I think, just a small portion of what's happened to millions of refugees around the world who try to save their life and run away from those dictatorship government. So I'll be happy to answer your question about the topic and also refugee rights.
I'm just a bit naive. The definition of immigrant versus refugee, are Iranians coming over as immigrants where it's all acceptable versus leaving Iran by force because of threat? So do some Iranians just come over voluntarily, they get the stamp, and everything is fine, and they're able to come over, or are they all coming over?
There is 2 different stories between immigrant and refugees. Immigrant is someone who comes to Canada or to any other countries as a student or those mostly rich who have money. Right now, we were talking, back to your question, we were talking about, or her question, she says, those maybe spies among the refugees. Well, many of the, even myself, I know as a political activist, I know many of the Iranian government who are ministers, mullahs, their sons, their families are living in Canada. And they didn't do nothing that I went or millions of refugees went. They just got their visa, they come to Canada just because they have money. But refugee is someone who doesn't have money and you have to wait somewhere to be accepted as a refugee. Like I waited in Turkey for 2 years. And some of them, they sell everything they had, they put money together, they come to Canada or any other, mostly European countries. Then there's another process, they have to wait for 2-3 years to be accepted. In many cases, they send them back to Iran too.
I can answer this question for a second. So immigrant people has a process too. It's not everybody sign for immigrant to a different country. They don't get accepted. They have to have a certain point to pass, knowing English, having good job quality, money to establish here, not going to cost any money. This is their process. Government, right now, after almost maybe 10 years, I don't know, they don't want refugee or immigrant come here and cost money for them. They want people to come with their money, knowledge, education, work ability, and that. This, we talk about the refugee rights is the, is putting down here. It's getting violated.
Yes.
I think it's.
Sorry, there's another. Yes.
I work a lot with families and children who come here from there, and we see a huge, as you said, they've experienced a lot of trauma and horrific situations, and we really have trouble addressing their needs for counseling and that. So I'm just wondering, like, what support is out there on every level? So not only like for parents, but children. We've tried to use like the Center for Victims of Torture. It has an all-its website. So what is available for people once they come here to help them to cope with you?
Unfortunately, there is not lots of help. There's a few organizations, but they don't have that much resources, like Iranian Refugee, Council of Refugee and Immigrant, but they don't have even one paid staff, so it's all volunteer. There is another organization, I know, victim of torture. They can go to that organization too, but it's not a lot really. Like refugees go through a lot of trauma when they come here. They just, you cannot imagine how they survive. That's why I think, I don't know exactly, but I think the state of suicide is a lot. Depression is a lot among the refugees who come here because it's not easy to integrate into the society. Yes, sir.
I think it's going to address some of the questions that you mentioned. Well, naturally, I mean, the government of Canada at the moment is concerning to clarify which refugee is a true refugee under threat before coming to Canada, and who is just coming to Canada to become, I mean, just because he or she doesn't have, or the family doesn't have the qualifications as to become as an immigrant. However, I think it would be better if you clarified what would be the consequences, even the government recognize somebody, okay, he has not done, I mean, for instance, he had not been converted to another religion before arrival, or he was not a political activist, or either, I mean, or for instance, homosexual, either of them, well, they have to have a claim. They come here. Well, sometimes they fail to prove it. But the problem is that the consequence that they would face if they would be deported to their original country. This is the problem. We understand the concerns of the Canadian government, but the other side, they should consider this part, that these people, the Iranian government is not committed, to guarantee the safety of people who have claimed to be something out of the country. So naturally, when they go back to the country, they are at the edge of being prosecuted and being on trial on what they claim. If the government will notice that they have trying to take an asylum in another third country, isn't it right?
I think we have your question.
Exactly, I was just going to mention the consequences that the cases who has been rejected would face after deportation to the original country.
They're going to be killed, basically.
Well, not all, but however, they would be at least under the... Many arrested, they would
many of them, but based on Geneva Convention, no country should deport anybody, those who face torture in their origin country. But unfortunately, they deport. And Iran, one of those countries that violate any basic rights whatsoever. Even you just cross the border in Iran to Turkey or even neighboring country, not Canada, not Europe, you go back, your punishment is 6 months being in jail. But and many, I believe, were those who were political activists. Like they put me in absence on the, in the 1984 in the death row in 1984 for being a political activist. I was trying to organize construction workers. So I mean, here unfortunately they keep saying prove it, but what I had to prove, since even if they put me in jail, many of Iranians went to jail first. The first thing they come out, they have to sign, and that they haven't been in jail, they haven't tortured them. Like I mean, you really, especially as a refugee, you can bring nothing to prove that you really what you went through. Last question? Okay, let's say my time is over. Last question. Yes. You passed. I passed side.
The question I have is, you mentioned that you were in Turkey for 2 years. So you mentioned that you were in Turkey for 2 years, and then just looking at the video, some have been there for 12 years. I'm wondering what makes the difference for some people to have to stay longer in transition before they get, accepted to another country. What are some of the things that make a difference?
It's just the process. United Nations has to accept them first as a refugee. Then one of those countries who accept refugees, like European countries or Canada and US, have to again go to the process to accept. For example, myself, I was interviewed by Denmark, then for no reason, they didn't give me nothing, I was rejected. Then I had to wait another 6 months to interview by the Canadian embassy. Then I was accepted again. I don't know why they accepted me, but they accepted me.
So there's really no sort of logical reason as to why somebody would have to wait 12 years versus 2 years.
It's just based on the cases. No, some of them they just don't. Someone who believe it in one of the United Nations officers who interview. He or she could not believe your case, so and then you have to wait another 1 year or 2 years to again be interviewed for the second time. And after the second time, they close actually your cases. Then opposition, the political parties, probably they do a protest or sign a letter to send it to the United Nations. It's a huge process. Then when after 4 or 5 years, they accept you. Then when they accept you, some countries, they don't come every year. They come every other years or every 2 years to take refugees. And the United Nations can do nothing. A refugee has to stay there until one country comes. And even, like I remember, some of them, they came, there was 3,000 refugees. They say we just need 50 cases.
So basically, it's same as dependent countries coming to pick up. Maybe they have 50 this year, 2 years later 100. But there is 2,000, 3,000 refugees waiting. So the process to wait for your turn is taking maybe 2 years, depending on how many people is in the total waiting.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay then, thanks.